Now, here are Morgan Streetman and Roxanne Wilder.
Well, hello, Morgan Streetman. I thought about you a lot this week because we had so many major stories. And I said, Morgan and I and Pat, we're all going to talk about these things on Monday. Some monumental global news, first of all.
Heck yeah. Well, and I mean, we got to, it's been a week off. I mean, we had to, because I had some minor surgery.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you want to talk about that.
Well, I'm not into all the personal stuff, but at the same time, it's no problem if folks here know. We had a little bit of sinus, correction type stuff going on. I mean, I've had one of those, what do you call it, a deviated septum. Mm-hmm. I think just about my whole life since I was a young kid getting into fisticuffs back in the day. And this is what happens to a lot of... Not me. No. Why would Streetman ever be involved in anything like that?
And I'm serious about that.
Yeah.
Now I'm picturing Morgan Streetman in a whole new light.
Right.
I'm such a big teddy bear. Yes. What can I say? Back in the day. But anyway, got that hopefully corrected. Seems like it's been corrected. So I've just took a week off there to continue healing up. Mm-hmm. And I tell you, I feel like I sure can breathe a lot better. I mean, hey, it's good. Hey, it's a good thing. I don't know if you hear any changes in my voice or anything. You might.
I'm going to have to listen. I'm going to have to close my eyes and listen to you talk right now because that's how I have to do it. But it's funny. Our doctor, I think I told you this, but he said to me one time, I want you to sleep on your right side because you have your deviated septum on your left side. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, but I heard it's better in certain circumstances to sleep on your left side. And he goes, well, it's better for you to breathe.
Yeah.
Or I heard it's better for your heart or something to sleep on your left side. And he's like, well, you need to get
oxygen.
To
breathe, right. No, it's the same kind of thing he told me. He said, I bet you always sleep on, whatever side, he said. Oh, yeah, in fact, I do, come to think of it. He's like, yeah, because you can't breathe through half your nose. So anyway, but glad to get that done.
Good.
And glad to be back at the mic here. And goodness gracious, we have got, just a million things we could talk about. I'm sorry we only have 1 hour here because, of course, we had the Democrat debates last week, which I know many of our listeners probably ignored. But, of course, I had to watch every minute of it. And, boy, if you didn't watch it, you really missed out on something because these people showed their true colors in these debates. And it's really something to see. It's hard to even describe it kind of in total. But just a lot of folks really anxious to try to get their moment in the sun and obviously desperate to become president of the United States. And I also have to say, a little disturbing as to the quality of some of the individuals who put themselves forward for president of the United States.
You think?
Apparently just anybody can do it. You think you'd have to be somebody of some substance or something like that. But no, just throw your name in the ring and we'll put you up there on the stage. So we're going to cover both nights of the debate a little bit later in the show. But before we get into some of that heavier stuff, we wanted to just take a quick look back. And I guess in a way this could be pretty heavy, Pat George. But we've been talking some about this Iran, we got the nuclear deal, and now Iran's pulling out of the nuclear deal. We already pulled out of the nuclear deal. Some question as to whether there was even a deal to begin with, because nothing was signed, apparently. Nothing was approved by any of our legislative bodies and things like that. So, there's really some major question as to what the deal was and whether there was a deal. But leaving that aside, what I was thinking of is more recently we've seen some attacks going on, like in the Strait of Hormuz, with some of these allegedly magnetic mines put on the side of tankers or potentially some kind of weaponized drone used in the attack. It's unclear what exactly happened. But, all of this brought back to mind something that I saw just recently, which was where Mike Pompeo was speaking at Texas A&M to a group of students, cadets there, obviously. And, he had some comments about what he did at the CIA that frankly, I found just a little bit off-putting, so I kind of wanted to share those with you because, it's through this lens that we need to view any of these types of things occurring. So let's listen to what Mike Pompeo told the students at Texas A&M. And just to preface it, he goes through and talks about the code of cadets at West Point. Because I don't know if you knew this, but Mike Pompeo is a West Point graduate. So he kind of goes back to his time at West Point and talks about the code of conduct there, and then brings it forward to what he did at the CIA. So listen here. It's just a short clip. Listen up.
When I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses. It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment.
I had to like that comment at the end there because I'm just like, what a non sequitur. Lying, cheating, and stealing remind you of the glory of the American experiment, I guess. I don't know what he was actually trying to say there. But anyway, Mike Pompeo is a guy who's known as a fairly religious guy, if you know that, and I don't know. I have to say this. I just have to be honest with the listeners here. I mean, that kind of commentary disturbs me a little bit. And I don't want to be naive. I know we live in a big boy world and there's lots of bad people in the world, and I get all of that. But at the same time, I don't think to me, it's disturbing that we would ever embrace lying, cheating, and stealing, because now, how are we any different from the communists, right? Isn't the communist philosophy the ends justify the means? And so in order to get to the end of communism, the means of lying, cheating, and stealing are all allowed. Mm-hmm. And now what we're saying is the same thing from the capitalist perspective, I guess. The ends justify the means, and to get to where we want to go in terms of the economic system we want to be under, we can lie, cheat, and steal to do it. I guess I side more with the cadet motto, and that's more of the kind of leadership that I'd be looking for is we do not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. So I just wanted to share that with folks. So when we're talking about these attacks and we're viewing things through a lens of, hey, could this be some kind of a false flag? Could this be some kind of a setup to get our country into a war? Because that may be what the powers that be are looking for, particularly within the military-industrial complex. That's the kind of lens that we're viewing it through. We're viewing it through the lens of what they've even told us in those quiet moments when they think they're talking to only friendly crowds, and they admit to the fact that, yeah, we'll lie to you. And, I mean, that's a pretty big deal, because how can we trust them then? So, anyway, just wanted to share that with folks. Now, something else we wanted to share, taking our local interest segment here, is have you seen what's been going on with the scooters?
Sad story.
It is a sad story. It's also exactly what, Morgan Streetman and Charlie Miranda predicted, right? A guy was killed in Tampa, I think it was just a week before last, riding around what amounts to Ybor City on one of the scooters, and apparently wasn't looking exactly where he was going. I mean, that seems to be the story.
Is that the one he was hit by the tanker?
He was hit by the tanker.
Yeah, that's 22nd Street Causeway.
Right.
Is that where it was?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Just outside of Ybor.
Right. And so, he got hit by the tanker. The guy stuck around the tanker driver, of course, and you would expect that they would. I mean, if you've got a commercial driver's license, and particularly if he didn't, do anything wrong, which is what it sounds like. He's cooperating and everything else. It sounds like the scooter driver just kind of cut across the road, not really realizing or paying attention that there was a truck coming. And I don't know if you've seen some of these scooter drivers around. Some of them got headphones on and stuff like that. I mean, they're really not paying a ton of attention. I had a whole group riding around the other night, just kind of crossing an intersection at Florida and one of the cross streets in downtown Tampa, kind of crossing through the center of the intersection while the light was green. And just kind of with a very, what do we call it, a devil-may-care attitude? Just very...
Cavalier.
Cavalier about it. So, I mean, I think we're going to continue to see more of these problems. We had a fight a couple of weeks before the death that just recently happened, a fight that occurred in South Tampa, where I guess some scooters had either gotten in the way of a biker or something like that, a bicyclist, and there was a brawl. I mean, you could see that one on social media, actually. If you go and search Scooter Brawl South Tampa, you can find that and take a look at that. So, this program just debuted. I mean, if you've been watching, you've probably seen folks breaking the rules all over the place. I've seen them on Bayshore all the time.
Well, you know what's going to happen this coming Thursday, 4th of July, and everything that's going on along the water down there?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's going to grab one of those.
Well, that's right. That's right. So, I think we're going to continue to see problems coming from that. Now, I don't know if we've quite got time before the break, but the next story we wanted to bring to you, I think this one is pretty important. So maybe we may only have time to introduce it, and we may have to get to it after the next break. But you know that there's a lady who's accused President Trump of raping her back in 1996. You familiar with that story?
She's not his type.
Well, that's what he says, right? But this is what I want to bring you because what we haven't, look, I think it's very strange for somebody to make stuff up like this. And to a degree, I mean, there needs to be a believing of the victim type of a mentality. But, of course, we need to have some more evidence, too. I mean, now, eyewitness testimony is evidence. So if somebody's saying this happened to me, then that can be weighed against other evidence, right? But here's what I want to get to is that the media is just not really treating this story fairly because, one, it didn't really vet this lady, and it's not really telling you some of the strange things that are coming out of this story now. And we're still seeing it reported. We're still seeing it tweeted. Heck, I think Kristen Gillibrand was tweeting something about it, just over the weekend about how this is, so important to believe victims and this lady was raped by President Trump, etc. And, when we get back on the other side of the break, we've got a clip that we're going to share with you of her being interviewed by Anderson Cooper. And frankly, folks, I think it's going to shock you. So stick around for that. Oh, man, we don't get much of a break there, Pat George.
No.
You're putting us back to work already. I mean, we're in the middle of chatting there. We're on. Well, this story that we want to share with you now, this is just something. Look, we don't want to judge this lady, but you just listen to her own words because I found this pretty shocking. Now, she was interviewed, I think it was last week on Anderson Cooper, and you'll hear that Anderson Cooper finds it pretty shocking as well. And that's toward the end of the clip. But at the beginning of the clip, I want you to note the fact that she claims she was not a victim. And then you've got to hear what she has to say about rape. Because this to me well, I guess I'll let you decide for yourselves what you think about what E. Jean Carroll has to say about rape here.
You don't feel like a victim?
I was not thrown on the ground and ravished. Which the word rape carries so many sexual connotations. This was not sexual. It hurt.
But I think most people think of rape as it is a violent assault. It is not.
I think most people think of rape as being sexy.
What?
Huh?
Let's take a short break.
Think of the fantasies.
We're going to take a quick break. If you can stick around, we'll talk more on the other side.
You're fascinating to talk to.
Oh, man, Anderson Cooper couldn't even keep a straight face there at the end. He's like, lady, what are you talking about? I'm fascinating to talk to. I got to get you off the air. I think most people think of rape as sexy. Let's take a quick break now.
Oh, my gosh.
Good
move.
Now,
Anderson.
that's something you haven't heard reported. This kind of stuff doesn't get reported. You might see it if you're frequenting conservative media, but this kind of stuff, I think CNNs of the world are still acting like this is a totally legitimate story from a totally legitimate accuser.
100%. I knew, as we were talking about this off air, Morgan, I knew that I'd seen an article recently about E. Jean Carroll and that she'd sexually harassed somebody. I couldn't remember who. Mm-hmm. And so I was searching for it. I go to Google. Every article that comes up is just in support of her. Oh, what's her life like now that she's made this accusation? Not, more dancing around the kookiness of it, like what we just heard. But I found the article I was looking for because I had to go back to the conservative website that it was on. Trump's rape accuser, E. Jean Carroll, reveals she sexually harassed Roger Ailes, flashed her legs in the air, called him pearl of his sex.
Goodness gracious. Well, you look at some of her history. She's very sexually provocative through her history. I don't want to get into it too much more than that. But, you can do the digging for yourself, folks. But I think that clip right there of her telling Anderson Cooper, one, she's not a victim, and two, she thinks that most people think, which I assume includes herself, think that rape is sexy. Think of the fantasies, Anderson. That kind of delivery really, in my mind, calls into question her entire story because I don't view that as the response of somebody, who's legitimately faced rape. I would think that you would not view it as sexy. Mm-hmm. I think that you would view it, like Anderson said, as a violent assault. Yeah, right. And a crime, and you were a victim, and it was wrong what was done to you. Now, maybe there's some, way to account for it psychologically that I'm missing here, but that quote right there just to me calls her entire story into question. And don't forget the fact that she's trying to sell a book. Mm-hmm. That this story only came out more than 20 years later, and only when she wants to sell a book with it, because that's important. Now, something else that's important, and I want to go ahead and turn the page on that story a little bit because we have so much to cover today. But, something else that's, monumental that happened just yesterday, Pat George. I'm sure you were watching this, and that is President Trump meeting with Chairman Kim at the DMZ, at the demilitarized zone in Korea, the border between North Korea and South Korea, which is probably the most armed and weaponized and secured border in the entire world. I haven't really given that a ton of thought, but I'm going to guess that's probably it. I mean, they literally have artillery cannons sitting on, across from each other, pointed at each other, and a lot of military folks there patrolling and things like that. Nobody gets across that border, right? I mean, that's one of the most highly secured areas in the whole world. Mm-hmm. And here comes President Trump marching right down to the DMZ, and he waited on the South Korean side. And then here comes Chairman Kim marching right to the DMZ. And, I found it so interesting to watch the video, and Chairman Kim has taken the time to learn some English that he could speak to President Trump. And he said it was good to see him again, and that he was surprised. He never thought he would see an American president at this spot. Mm-hmm. And, of course, President Trump also was surprised that, he's there to cross over, and they walked together into North Korea. Not very far, but it was a very symbolic moment for the cameras.
I wonder if that was the first time for Kim
to walk down to the DMZ like that. I bet you it was. I bet you it was, because he would not be necessarily safe just walking up to the line like that.
No. And so the former presidents Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton have both been to North Korea, but only after they left office. And several presidents, including Barack Obama, have been to the border but have never crossed over it.
Yeah. Well, it was a huge historic moment. I mean, it just now that came out of, I think, all of these trade negotiations with China, and we've recently seen China take full responsibility for North Korea. I think we discussed that a couple of weeks ago, either that or I might have just discussed it in my own head with myself a couple of weeks ago. But China kind of came out and said, that they have a historic friendship with North Korea, and essentially, in my view, took responsibility for what's going on the Korean Peninsula. So, I mean, a lot of these signals, it all involves the trade conflict with China, because China was using North Korea as a negotiating tool. Whenever we would try to kind of start to crack down on some of these issues with China in the past, the North Korean threat has really spiked up and sort of distracted us, and we thought, well, we got to deal with this Korean thing. We can't upset things in that area. We need China on our side, so we better not really crack down on them in terms of trade and what they're doing with their currency and intellectual property thefts, which I think are the biggest issue, is the theft of our innovation.
Do you think it's China telling them, hey, I think it's time to launch something?
Launch what, though?
Well, and some of his missiles that he says he's testing and things. Do you think China's...
Well, we'll see. I mean, let's wait and see.
Directing them what to do?
Yeah, I do. I think they have been in the past, but I think at this point they now can't.
Right.
Because I think they now own the problem in North Korea, which we've always known. I mean, it's not a secret that China has controlled North Korea. Now, the media may pretend like they're separate states, but where do you think North Korea got its missile technology from?
See, I didn't know this until you're telling us right now.
Well, because the media won't tell you this kind of stuff, and if you don't really look into it and you got to spend a lot of time looking into it, and then you got to have a little bit of bravery to challenge the prevailing narrative. So you've got to think, well, I see that on CNN and even Fox News. Everywhere I look, I see the same story, but I'm looking at the facts, and I'm going to make a different analysis of what this means, and I'm going to come up with my own thought process. I mean, that takes a lot of guts.
Sure.
I mean, because, everybody else is telling you you're wrong, but in fact, you may well be right. So as a historic moment, I think it deserves to kind of stand on its own. President Trump ought to get some credit here. This was a major crisis before he came into office. This Korean Peninsula dispute has been,
ongoing forever.
Yeah, and it's top of the news before he got into office. Mm-hmm. And look, since he's been in office, we haven't had any missiles launched out over Japan. We haven't had any tests of long-range ballistic missiles. We've had some very short-range missiles fired, but nothing long-range, nothing like what was going on before President Trump came into office. And you can see, I don't think it's fake, you can see the relationship that he's developed with Chairman Kim. They obviously have a relationship. Now, I'm not saying Chairman Kim's a good guy. I really don't know him, and it does sound like he's done some horrible things to his people. But this I can tell you, that President Trump has got to find a way to negotiate with these world leaders, because we can't be going around the world and just taking out the world leaders that we don't like or we feel we can't get along with. The people that replace them are usually about 10 times worse, or the situation that replaces them. And we can look at something like Libya as an example of that. Yeah, we didn't like Gaddafi, but at least Gaddafi was kind of holding the state together and was somebody that we could have some degree of dealings with. Mm-hmm. Now, What's going on in Libya? It's a completely failed state with multiple parties fighting for control of the country, none of whom are particularly friendly to us, some of whom include the al-Qaeda, type Libyan rebels that exist there. So, all right, well, let's turn the page now because, we're barely going to have time to address some of this. But the 2 nights of Democrat debates last week, I mean, you had to have watched these things. It was like a circus show.
I talked to you right after the first night. I didn't talk to you after this, and I haven't heard your opinion yet. I'm sure we're going to hear that, all of it right now. But did it get better or worse in your eyes?
Worse.
It's hard to say. The first night, really, when you look back at it, was just not very exciting. The first night was obviously the B players. It was not the A players in this game. Now, what's interesting is there's the music. I don't know if either of you believe, but they claim that the selections for which night they were on, also where they stood on the stage and what order they asked the questions in, were all random. I didn't see a bit of randomness to any of that. I saw them targeting people like Elizabeth Warren, who just happened to be standing in the center of the stage, and they asked her more questions. And like on the first night, they didn't ask hardly anything of Tulsi Gabbard.
The one thing that surprised me across the board is this team or pool of Democratic candidates wants to take our country in a completely different direction, which is a strange strategy to me, given that most people are happy with the economy.
Yeah. I mean, aren't things going pretty well? Well, not if you listen to the Democrats. If you listen to the Democrats, things have never been worse in this country. Meanwhile, I thought we'd kind of had a turnaround. I thought after the Obama years, which was like an arid desert where with, 1.5% GDP growth and we were never going to see these manufacturing jobs come back. And then here we are. Trump's doing great. We'll be back to tell you more on the Morgan Streetman Show.
And we're back on the Morgan Streetman Show. Excited to get into discussion about the Democratic debate. By the way, guess who I saw this weekend?
Who's that?
Wolf Blitzer.
Oh, wow.
So he
Wolf
was obviously
Blitzer.
ran into him in an elevator.
Did you throw a vanilla milkshake at him?
No.
Oh, well, you missed your opportunity because apparently that's how we have political discussions in this country now is we throw vanilla milkshakes with cement mixed into them.
Did you greet him? Did you say hello?
Someone I was with did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Somebody braver.
Yes. Someone I was with said yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. It was
you ever see the
funny interaction.
Okay. You ever see the Wolf Blitzer Jeopardy?
Yes, I've
thing
seen
on
that
YouTube.
on
I mean, can't. Is that real?
I think it's on SNL, isn't it?
Okay, I don't know, but man, he doesn't get anything right. I'll just say that. If that's on SNL, then that makes some sense.
That's where it's, yeah, I've seen that.
Is he tall?
No, but he actually looks better in person than he does on TV. Okay. Isn't that funny? Because usually it's opposite, because people are usually blown out and they look good. Although with HDTV, it's different now. But he looked better in person.
Was he dressed down?
Yeah, he was casual, and he's got to be close to 70 years old now, and he looked pretty good for 70. Yeah. So that was a surprise. Yep.
Yeah. Where'd you see him?
In an elevator in a hotel.
Oh, well, there you go.
But he was obviously there for the Dem debates.
Was he? Okay,
yes.
So he was down in Miami then for the debates. Okay. And you didn't get to go to the debates, did you?
No.
Oh, you would have loved it. Mm-hmm. No, you wouldn't. You'd have been pulling your hair out.
I didn't even watch him. I just read about him because I knew you've got everything we need to know in here.
Oh, man. Not only did I watch him, but I had to watch him a bunch of times, and I had to, cut the clips and edit them. So I've seen this all more than I really want to.
Torture.
I know. But I tried to pull out some funny stuff. I tried to keep a little bit of sense of humor about this. Mm-hmm. And one of the funniest things that I heard on the first night, the B team debate, was old Cory Booker's story about how he hears gunshots in his neighborhood at night. This is a United States senator who's trying to pretend like he's from the ghetto. Let's listen in.
Well, what's even worse is I hear gunshots in my neighborhood. I think I'm the only one. I hope I'm the only one on this panel here that had 7 people shot in their neighborhood just last week. Someone I knew, Shahad Smith, was killed with an assault rifle at the top of my block last year.
At the top of his block? Can you believe that?
He needs a move.
I mean, I hope he's packing heat when he's walking around his block. He would get shot up there.
Seriously, what is he talking? I mean,
he's just pandering. He's just pandering. It's political pandering. I mean, I don't know. The truth is, I don't know where he lives, and I'm sure I guess most of New Jersey must be a highly dangerous place. I don't know. I've been there a few times, but that's not really what my experience with it. But anyway, I just have a really hard time listening to a United States senator, which is one of the most elite groups that you can be a part of. And he's trying to claim like he's down on his block, can't sleep at night because of all the gunshots. That just doesn't ring true to me. Anyway, I call that pandering, which is, frankly, that's kind of what Cory Booker's known for, is pandering.
Cory from the block.
Yeah, Cory from the block, exactly. Now, I'll tell you, there was a couple more people the first night that I want to point out. And I'll just say, if you watched it, I think Tulsi Gabbard, number one, they tried to ignore her, if you didn't catch that, the whole night. Why? Because Tulsi's the only anti-war candidate standing up there. And that's amazing. I mean, when you talk about a uniparty and the Democrats and Republicans being basically the same thing, in a lot of ways they're different, but one thing that they can definitely agree on is total war all the time. Constant war forever. And Tulsi is different from that. So for that reason alone, I respect her. Now, I don't agree with a lot of what she says, but of the folks that are up there, I at least respect that she's willing to stand up to the war drums and say we got to stop all this war, this endless war in all these different countries. It's not doing us any favors. It's really not. It's not in our interests. But, okay, now let's talk about some of the other folks the first night. I want you to hear Senator Elizabeth Warren's opening answer, because this kind of sets the stage, and she's obviously the one that the Democrat Party was telling us we should focus on the first night. They want to develop her as an alternative to Biden. Let's listen to what she had to say, because I think this is important. You need to hear what these people think.
And we'll start this evening with Senator Elizabeth Warren. Senator, good evening to you.
Thank you.
You have many plans: free college, free childcare, government health care, cancellation of student debt, new taxes, new regulations, the breakup of major corporations. But this comes at a time when 71% of Americans say the economy is doing well, including 60% of Democrats. What do you say to those who worry this kind of significant change could be risky to the economy?
So I think of it this way. Who is this economy really working for? It's doing great for a thinner and thinner slice at the top. It's doing great for giant drug companies. It's just not doing great for people who are trying to get a prescription filled. It's doing great for people who want to invest in private prisons, just not for the African Americans and Latinx whose families are torn apart, whose lives are destroyed, and whose communities are ruined. It's doing great for giant oil companies that want to drill everywhere, just not for the rest of us who are watching climate change bear down upon us. When you've got a government, when you've got an economy that does great for those with money and isn't doing great for everyone else, that is corruption, pure and simple. We need to call it out. We need to attack it head on. And we need to make structural change in our government, in our economy, and in our country.
Well, okay, I had to cut the applause off there. But if you listen to some of the other things she says, she eventually talks about starting to put people in jail for this corruption, starting to put business owners in jail. That's just stupid. First of all, we tried that with the Arthur Anderson thing and Andrew Weissman and that whole group, and they destroyed. Yeah, they destroyed exactly involving the Enron, accounting issues. They destroyed a company that employed 80,000 people, Arthur Anderson, only to find out that in truth it didn't commit any crimes. Period. The end. That's what the Supreme Court said, no crimes committed. But this lady wants to put people in jail. I want you to listen up for something, folks. Listen to people that start their answers with the word so. Because if you haven't noticed this, I've noticed this. It's unfortunately endemic among college-educated people and seems to be a professorial way of talking. I find it to be very weak oratory to start something with so. But I tell you, that's how she answers.
I say so all the time.
Well, at the beginning of your question, well, that's how people are talking now. That's what I'm saying. And I listen to that, and to me, to me, that sounds very weak-minded.
I buy time when I do that.
Yes, so of course that's buying time.
So let's talk about this.
So let me rephrase your question while I think of how I might be able to wiggle out of answering it.
It's better than
All right, better keep moving here. We're going to run out of time. I got to share this with you from Julian Castro, because he ought to be out of the race after this. But listen to what he says about reproductive justice and the right to have an abortion. And listen particularly to who he wants to have a right to have an abortion, because this blows my mind.
I don't believe only in reproductive freedom. I believe in reproductive justice.
What does that even mean?
What that means is that just because a woman, or let's also not forget someone in the trans community, a trans female, is poor, doesn't mean they shouldn't have the right to exercise that right to choose. And so I absolutely would cover the right to have an abortion.
For a trans female. Because, there's a lot of trans females out there needing abortions. Did you miss this? Did you miss this story? It's impossible. It's not possible. Anyway, it just blows my mind that this kind of talk, goes unchallenged. And because we live in such a politically correct society and everybody's afraid to say anything, I'll say it. Trans females don't have children. There's no need for them to have the right to choose an abortion. I mean, isn't it that simple? Hello? Okay. Now let's talk about second night, because we're going to have to speed it up here. We're not going to get to everything, I'm sure. But I want to highlight something that Kamala Harris said, Senator Harris. This was considered her best line of the night. Now, one of the features of these debates was everybody kind of talking over each other and trying to battle for position and trying to get their screen time one way or the other. And so she says this because people are talking over her when she's been asked a question. But I want you to just think about the reasoning behind what she says.
Hey, guys, you know what? America does not want to witness a food fight. They want to know how we're going to put food on their table. Yeah?
Okay, now that was a canned line. If you think she came up with that on the spot, you're crazy. We've seen what happens to Kamala Harris when she's put on the spot. She absolutely freezes. She can't come up with anything. So that was a canned line that she was ready to give. But importantly, think about the mentality. Americans want to know how we're going to put food on the table. Ladies and gentlemen, government doesn't put food on your table. If you don't understand that by now, I mean, you've missed out on the entirety of the 20th century. Government doesn't put food on the table. All government is a weight on innovation and the economy. It's a dead weight in a lot of cases. It's inefficient. It doesn't accomplish anything. But if you're looking to government to provide for you, and apparently that's what the Democrats are pitching, and that's what they're pitching to all their undocumented Democrats that they're bringing in right now, that they want to be the new voters, because you know what? They don't like me and you. They don't like the American people, because we don't want that communist crap in our country. And so what they say is, you know what? We'll import a bunch of new voters. Since the voters that are here won't vote for us, we'll import a bunch of new voters. And they want to listen to what they have to say. I mean, they started attacking the immigration issue. And, there's a real moral superiority. And here's Mayor Pete and what he has to say about it right after they all hold their hands up to say that they would decriminalize illegal border crossing. So you know what? Just come on. There's nothing wrong with it. Why even have a border at all?
If you'd be so kind, raise your hand if you think it should be a civil offense rather than a crime to cross the border without documentation. Can we keep the hands up so we could see them?
Let's remember, that's not just a theoretical exercise. That criminalization, that is the basis for family separation. You do away with that, it's no longer possible. Of course, it wouldn't be possible anyway in my presidency because it is dead wrong. We got to talk about one other thing, because the Republican Party likes to cloak itself in the language of religion. Now, our party doesn't talk about that as much, largely for a very good reason, which was we are committed to the separation of church and state, and we stand for people of any religion and people of no religion. But we should call out hypocrisy when we see it. And for a party that associates itself with Christianity, to say that it is okay to suggest that God would smile on the division of families at the hands of federal agents, that God would condone putting children in cages, has lost all claim to ever use religious language again.
All claim to ever use religious language. You can't even talk about religion anymore if you believe in enforcing our immigration laws. That's what he's saying if you want to cut through the nonsense. That's what he's saying. That's what they believe. They're making this into a moral issue. And you know what? Watch, because soon it'll be they want to attack you physically in public like Antifa does if you don't agree with them on the way they want to handle immigration. Just to drive this point home, let's hear what Bernie Sanders had to say about immigration.
And that is, on day one, we take out our executive order pen and we rescind every damn thing on this issue that Trump has done.
So they want to rescind everything that Trump has done, okay? Most of which they haven't even let him do. Now, another thing we had for you, another clip that we had for you was them asking for a show of hands. And I think this was important because President Trump pointed out this is where they all lost the election. This was on the second night. Give us a show of hands who would extend universal health care to, well, they didn't call them, what they call them, undocumented workers, whatever, illegal aliens, whatever you want to call them, illegal immigrants, whatever name you prefer. Who's going to give them universal health care paid for by us, the U.S. taxpayer? And you know what? Everybody on that stage, all 10 of them, raised their hands. They care more about people who aren't even citizens of this country than they do about our own citizens, many of whom are living homeless, could use some services, some of whom live in fear of crimes committed near the border, and all kinds of things. It's just unbelievable to me, folks. When we come back, we're going to go out there and find out about a U.S. presidential candidate who loves Soviet Union. back on the clock at the debates. Back on the clock.
Right. Because we're going to go out there, but not yet because you have another really good one for us, right?
I got to share this with y'all, and this is the one kind of outlier on the second night, Marianne Williamson. And you got to love this lady because she's just pretty loopy, and you want to hear how she's going to defeat President Trump. I love this. It's with love. She's going to defeat him with love.
Sorry we haven't talked more tonight about how we're going to beat Donald Trump. I have an idea about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not going to be beaten just by insider politics talk. He's not going to be beaten just by somebody who has plans. He's going to be beaten by somebody who has an idea what this man has done. This man has reached into the psyche of the American people, and he has harnessed fear for political purposes. So, Mr. President, if you're listening, I want you to hear me, please. You have harnessed fear for political purposes, and only love can cast that out. So sir, I have a feeling you know what you're doing. I'm going to harness love for political purposes. I will meet you on that field. And, sir, love will win.
Oh, so touching. Almost brings a tear to my eye, Pat George. Love will defeat fear. She will meet you on the field, not a field of battle, but a field, and love will win. Gotta love that. Anyway, that's like Oprah. You want to know how Oprah would do in the Democrat presidential debates? That's Oprah for you.
She'd give everybody a car to win.
Yeah. Okay, now let's be serious now. This is a serious issue. Do you know that there is a presidential candidate who went on a honeymoon in the Soviet Union in the late 1980s? Can you guess who that might have been?
Bill Clinton.
No.
Honeymoon then.
Current presidential candidate.
Oh.
Try your favorite communist, Bernie Sanders.
Oh.
June 13th, 1988. Now, you can find the video. This is shocking. You can go out there and find the video. If you go out and you type Bernie Sanders honeymoon Soviet Union and look for the video by Hal Turner, because some of them are people talking about the video. And I just want you to watch the video itself, because here he is sitting at a table, no clothes on. Everybody at the table is devoid of clothing. The table is full of empty bottles of vodka, and they're singing. Just so you know, what happened was the Burlington Town Council took a group over to the Soviet Union to examine this wonderful system that they have. Now, we're going to play a little bit of the video clip for you so you can get an idea of what's going on there. And then we're going to switch and tell you some of what Bernie said afterwards. So here you go. Go watch this video.
Or don't.
Now, the lady who's speaking right now, Bernie is sitting next to her without a shirt on, and God knows what else he doesn't have on. Okay, she's saying basically they need to sing another song because one side of the table sang a song. It's hard to hear because she's apparently been drinking. But here they go. Okay, that's enough of that. You can watch the video yourself. They're singing, "This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land." If you didn't know, that's an old communist song. Mm-hmm. That is a communist song, but that's what they're singing. They're in Moscow, Russia. Now, if you don't believe me, listen to what Bernie Sanders had to say once he got back. And this is him speaking to the town council in Burlington. Listen.
I think it's also fair to point out that when we were in Moscow, for example, I think most of the people here also were extremely impressed by their public transportation system. The stations themselves were absolutely beautiful, including many works of art, chandeliers that were beautiful. It was a very, very effective system.
Very effective.
Also, I was impressed by the youth programs that they have, their palaces of culture for the young people, a whole variety of of programs for young people, and cultural programs which go far beyond what we do in this country. We went to a theater in Yaroslavl, which was absolutely beautiful, had 3 separate stages where cultural programs are put on by professional actors and actresses, including a puppeteer area. And the cost, the highest price of the ticket that you can get, was the equivalent of $1.50.
Okay, now you can go out and get this also. Listen to him talking about when he went to Moscow, and following him is his wife, Jane Sanders, praising it. And remember, they went to Moscow the day after they got married. So this was their honeymoon. They honeymooned in the Soviet Union.
Because nothing says romance like communism.
Thank you. Romance and culture. Now, here's something that you need to hear, and I don't know that we're going to be able to get it in. Pat George, how much time do we have left?
You've got about 3 minutes.
Okay, we do have enough. I got to play this for you. You ought to look this up. A gentleman named Yuri Bezmenov was a KGB agent who defected to the USA many, many years ago in the late 70s or early 80s. And in 1984, he did an interview with G. Edward Griffin that's on the web that you can find, and he talks about this. Now, remember, this is 4 years before Sanders even went there. See if you recognize what Yuri Bezmenov, the KGB agent, is describing here. Listen carefully.
Back in Moscow, I was immediately recruited by Novosti Press Agency, which is a propaganda and ideological subversion front for the KGB. Another area of activity when I was working for the Novosti was to accompany groups of so-called progressive intellectuals, writers, journalists, publishers, teachers, professors of colleges. Most of them pretended they don't understand that we are actually working on behalf of the Soviet government and the KGB. They pretended that they are actually being guests, VIP intellectuals, that they are treated according to their merits and their intellectual abilities. For us, they were just a bunch of political prostitutes to be taken advantage for various propaganda operations.
Now listen to what he says about keeping them drinking. You'll have to hear this when you watch the Bernie video and all that vodka's on the table. Listen carefully.
Pay special attention to number of bottles on the table. This is one of the ways to kill the awareness or curiosity of foreign journalists. One of my functions was to keep foreign guests permanently intoxicated the moment they land at Moscow airport. I had to take them to the VIP lounge and toast to friendship and understanding between the nations of the world. Glass of vodka, then a second glass of vodka. And in no time, my guests would be feeling very happy. They would see everything in kind of pink, nice color. And that's the way I had to keep them permanently for the next 15 or 20 days. At a certain point in time, I had to withdraw alcohol from them so that some of them, who are the most recruitable, would feel a little bit shaky, guilty, trying to remember what they were talking last night. That's the time to approach them with all kind of nonsense, such as joint communique or statement for Soviet propaganda.
Okay, there's some more to that. You can go out and listen to it yourself. But did you hear that? The goal of the KGB agents was to keep those fake intellectuals like Bernie Sanders, who would show up over there drunk the whole time they're there, just like the video shows. And that way they could use them for propaganda purposes. Think about that when you want to go vote for Bernie Sanders. He's a communist agent. I'm Morgan Streetman, and that's the way I see it. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.